You're live.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation with Professor Inderjeet Kaur and me on the topic of a theory of Anhad Nad in Gurbani. My name is Anna Schultz. The focus will be on Professor Kaur's wonderful new book, Sensational Rhythms of the Ineffable, Ethical Affects in Sikh Shabad Kirtan, which is forthcoming with Oxford University Press very soon on December 19th. And more specifically, we'll focus on her theorization around Anhad Nad. My role here is primarily as interlocutor and also as moderator of questions. We are grateful to the Sikh Foundation International and especially to Tanmeet Gujral and Kiki Kabani for inviting us to share this hour with all of you. So how we will run this is that Dr. Kaur and I will spend around the first half hour in conversation before we open things up to a broader conversation with all of you. I will moderate questions, so you'll be able to send questions on Q&A to me or on the chat using the chat function. And unless it's like a point of clarification while we're conversing, we'll save most of the questions for about a half an hour from now. So we decided to do self-introductions rather than introducing one another. So I'll first say a few words about myself. I'm professor of ethnomusicology and chair of the Department of Music at the University of Chicago. I'm an ethnomusicologist and cultural historian interested in music's power to activate profound religious experience and suture communities, and music as power, that is, music's role in structuring and dismantling caste, race, gender, nation, and class. My first book is Singing a Hindu Nation, Marathi Devotional Performance and Nationalism, which was on Marathi Rashtriya Kirtan. And my second book is Echoes of Translation, Audibility and Relationality in Indian Jewish Women's Songs, which is forthcoming in 2026. I have known Inderjeet for quite a few years. We met in the Bay Area when she was living in Santa Cruz and Berkeley, and I was teaching at Stanford. And we connected around our shared interest in South Asian devotional music and religious experience, and especially around diverse forms of expression known as kirtan. I've long been an admirer of her sensitive, deep, nuanced ethnographic work, and I'm thrilled to be in conversation with her today. So, Inderjeet, I now invite you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for these kind words about my work. And I totally echo the respect I have for your work and how we connect around these very important issues of devotional experience and how important it is to connect with the people and do ethnographic work and bring it to both the academic world and the communities at large. So just to share a little bit about myself, I'm at the University of Michigan, an associate professor in the Department of Musicology. My research has so far focused on Kirtan, on Sikh Kirtan, and on the experience of Kirtan in particular as animating the ethical message of Guru Granth Sahib. So as much as I am interested in devotional experience, I'm interested in how devotional experience becomes an ethical sensation. And so ethics is a central in my research interest, because I see Guru Granth Sahib as a ethical guide, a guide to everyday ethical life, and to Kirtan as animating this message of Guru Granth Sahib. So I've written a few articles in this subject before my forthcoming book that you have mentioned. And I've also written on how the paired ritual of kirtan and langar. So often langar, the free community kitchen, is flows next or along with kirtan, and how this paired practice is a practice of oneness and is a practice of some of the ethical guidance in Guru Granth Sahib. I've also written a bit on how kirtan is a connective tissue between Sikh communities across nations and continents. So a bit on transnationalism, but that's not been the major, but a minor part of my research output. So I'm excited today to talk about Anhad Nad, oneness and ethical action, because I think the sonic element is so important in Sikh worship. And Guru Granth Sahib, in the theory in Guru Granth Sahib, in the metaphysics of Guru Granth Sahib, and in Sikh practice. And, I want to stress in our conversation how much of our practice actually stems from the guidance of Guru Granth Sahib. So Kirtan is not there willy-nilly, but because in Guru Granth Sahib it says, please do Kirtan. It's the best thing to do. So this link between Gurmat, or the wisdom in Guru Granth Sahib, and our everyday practice is of immense interest to me. Are you muted, Anna?
Thank you. Were there some slides you wanted to share at this point, or should we save that for a little bit later?
Yeah, maybe I will start my slide share and then go with the conversation. I'm so excited that we are getting to do this. Okay, so I'll hit share here and let's see. Okay, how is that?
That's good.
Here's the presentation mode. Okay.
Great.
All right. So I titled my presentation Anhad Nad, Oneness and Everyday Ethical Action. And as I just said, that I see a deep connection between these and the overall Gurmat and metaphysics in Guru Granth Sahib. So the points that I want to make today is how Anhad Nad in Guru Granth Sahib is explained as the very vibratory and sonic quality of Ik Oankar, of the ultimate reality, and how the felt vibratory sonic experience of Ik Oankar is something that is of the body itself. And so the link between the metaphysics, the ultimate reality, and the body is something that I will try to expand upon in this presentation. And the embodied experience of oneness and relationality of all existence, and therefore the ethics of selflessness, empathy, and care. And so, Ik Oankar, we know, translates to one vibration. This is understood as a vibration of oneness. We know that Anhad Nad is also understood as a vibration. And in Gurbani, in fact, there is a close link between Ik Oankar and Anhad Nad, and therefore of oneness as flowing through these two ways of understanding the ultimate reality and our own reality as we exist as part of this ultimate reality. I will start with a Shabad or a quote from a Shabad. Ad Anil Anad Anahat Jug Jug Eko Ves. So this is describing Ikonkar or Vaheguru, the divine or ultimate reality, as we understand from Guru Granth Sahib. And we see already that the idea of Anhad or unbounded, which that means, is already there as a quality of Vaheguru, as a quality of Ikonkar. So there's a direct link between these two understandings and of oneness as a foundational truth. So Ik Onkar Satnam, that's the opening, those are the opening phrases of Guru Granth Sahib, that this one vibration is a foundational, foundational truth. And so I'm linking the vibration of Anhad Nad as given in this Shabad as an aspect of Ik Onkar to oneness. Now, there are several Shabad that mention Ik Onkar and Anhad Nad as all-pervading vibration. And sound is vibration at its most basic level. And so I want to also point out that while we think of sound as something that is audible and audible to the human ear, there is a lot of sound or frequencies that are not audible to the human ear, but audible to other species, and also vibrations and frequencies that are not audible by most species, but they are there. And that's what I believe is Anhad Nad and going beyond Ik Onkar. So in these Shabad we see Sabay kat Ram bole, Rama bole, Ram bina ko bole re. So in speaking of Ik Onkar, of Vaheguru, addressed as Ram here, as the all-pervading, the verb is used of sounds, of sounding, right? And so it's saying that the whole world is humming, but we know it's humming not in audible frequencies, but it is humming. And then there's another quote which says, Pugat Gyan Deya Pandaran Kat Kat Vajay Nad. So that the divine nourishes with wisdom and compassion, and in every entity plays Nad. And so again, we have this notion of sound, and we have this notion of playing sound or playing music. But I also want to invite everyone to think of playing as doing something. And there will be Shabad that speak to that as well. Now, from this idea of this all-pervading vibration, I want to pick up this Shabad to point to the vibratory constitution of the body itself. Jo Brahmande soi pinde, jo khoje so pave. And so we are being told that this all-pervading vibration is in fact permeates the body itself. And of course, it is often sort of lost in our daily perception because of our whatever we are engrossed in. But if we seek, we will find it and we can perceive it. So this oneness is of the body. Ekal mati kunjar chiti pajan hai bahu nana re. Asthavar jangam keet patangam kat kat ram samana re. So this is the same clay that all existence is formed of, so the same vibration. But I want to point out that there is also in the Shabad diversity, so that oneness does not mean sameness. There is diversity, but I like to think of oneness in terms of parity, that across all diversity, this oneness means a certain relationality of parity or equality that we want to imbibe from this guidance. Now, coming to the idea of play and of dwelling in the body, Home Mar Kamal Pargasa. So here we get the sense of why we are not able to perceive this vibration of oneness in the body that we are constituted of as part of Ik Onkar, is this sort of individualized subjectivity that we have this skin encased body, which is separate from others. But in Guru Granth Sahib, it says that thinking that way is the egotistical way of thinking, and it is actually an illusion and a maya. But beyond that, the ultimate reality is one where we are connected and we are ourselves of unbounded energy, of that vibratory energy. So, Anhad Vajay Nij Kar Vasa. Anhad plays and dwells in one's own body home. And so we can focus on that dwelling, we can focus and use the body as a tool to play ethical action, is what where I want to go to. And so this brings us to the idea of everyday ethical action. So connecting Anhad Nad, oneness, and everyday ethical action, the three aspects of my presentation, and gives an agency to the body instrument that actually it can do that. It can play ethical action. And we have this beautiful Shabad, Asi Kunguri Vajaye Jogi, Jit Kinguri Anhad Vajaye. Harsyo rahe, live lie. So we are given this guidance to use our body in that way. And we know ethical action is not just a mental thought, it is something to be enacted by the body. And so the body instrument here is given that agency. And that the body can actually access its divine qualities of oneness and unboundedness. And the Shabad talked about home first, but here also we are given other paths or tools, and some of them are awe and love that are mentioned in this Shabad. Pao pao doe patlai jogi eh sarir kar dandi. So the dandi is like the stem of the lute or the instrument, and to sound awe for the divine and love for the divine. In different lines of this Shabad, it also talks about Sat Santok, so truthfulness and contentment. And so a lot of these virtues are mentioned in the Shabad, along with seeing the body as an instrument, as a tool of enacting ethical action. And another Shabad, Kaya Nagari. Now, this is really sort of putting the body in, in this sort of more expansive perspective, that it's like a whole township, it's like a dwelling. And there are other Shabad which say that there are various channels and energy flows, etc., in the body that can all be used for this purpose. So Kaya Nagari mein mangan chade jogi ta naam palle paaye. So we must enact and seek within the body, not looking elsewhere, or not looking just in mental cognitive processes. So this is my initial sort of part of sort of taking the theoretical aspects of connecting Anhad Nad and oneness and ethical action.
Great. Well, thank you. I think in a moment, I'll ask you to connect this to some other aspects of your research. But first, I want to say a few words about your book, which I've been fortunate to read in manuscript form. I really love the kind of open-hearted sensory ethnographic research method that emerges from your lifetime of participation in Sikh Kirtan, but is not limited to your own experience. So we as readers get to join you on this journey of actively listening to how diverse Sikh worshippers work toward ethical religious goals through a variety of sonic and sensory techniques. And I also really appreciate how you foreground Sikh ways of knowing and being instead of, or rather more than, Euro-American social theory. And you gave us a taste of that in your discussion of Gurbani as it relates to um, these questions of Anhad Nad, vibration, the body. So you draw on that really wonderful well of research and experience to theorize the body as a site of sensational listening, and showing us how audible and inaudible forms of rhythmic vibration extend beyond and between bodies, connecting all beings and entities, not into an ethical oneness. I feel that you're invested in the goodness that can be engendered by an awareness of this sonic relationality, and that's really something we all stand to learn from, I think. And I myself felt that your reading your book was sort of a spiritual experience in itself, that it increased my ability, and it increases, I believe, readers' abilities to sense connection and find that ethical core. So I found it deeply inspiring, and I hope the other listeners will as well. So I'd like to ask you a bit along those lines, um, taking some of these, some of what you learned from this study of the Guru Granth Sahib, which you have just shared with us. Um, how did that um, come to life in your your ethnographic work? And I know you worked with people performing and singing in um, various styles of Sikh Kirtan, various contexts. So if you could just say a bit about how this theory comes alive in everyday experience, and how it inspires everyday ethical action that you encountered in your research.
Thank you, Anna. Since my slide presentation is still open, I will use some of the slides to answer those questions, though they are not all prepared to directly answer your question,
Mhm.
but I will weave in and out of those. And thank you for your kind words about the book. I really appreciate it. Um, so, in the book, I'm really trying to look at Sikh worship and Kirtan as practices that amplify our embodied quality of oneness. And so the theory is that we are made of oneness, but we forget that. And we need some help to bring that to the fore. And so there are these practices that are there at the Gurdwara and also outside. But most of my ethnographic work was at Gurdwara and particularly at San Jose Gurdwara. So I don't know if there are people here from the Bay Area, but those of you, if you've been to the San Jose Gurdwara, you would recognize when we share or when I share the cover of the book, that it shows the worship hall, the main worship hall at San Jose Gurdwara. And actually, there are a number of photos from San Jose Gurdwara of the langar, of taking prasad, of the kirtan jatha, etc., that are there. So, we have so many practices just within the Gurdwara itself, which I see as a practice of this quality of oneness that we have, which I see as ethical practices. And I've enumerated some of them, which is to sing or chant every time one is praying this ardas, which calls for the welfare of all. So every ardas, every kirtan or worship session at home or in the Gurdwara ends with this call for Sarbat Da Bala. And so this itself, this call for the welfare of all is a relational way of being. And that relationality speaks to oneness. Gurdwaras are open house, or Gurdware rather, I should say, are open house. There is no membership. Everyone is welcome, of course, those who enter with respect. And there are so many practices of equality, of sitting at the same level, of not excluding anyone, whatever their, religious practice otherwise or belief otherwise is, of partaking in the same sacred song, the same sacred food. There is no congregational practice that is sort of exclusionary. It is accessible to all. And there is this etiquette of comportment, of humility, respectfulness, and care. And coming to ethnographic practice, I noticed how, because many times the people that I saw outside of Gurdwara, say at parties or other events, were also I saw them at the Gurdwara also, and their comportment was completely different in terms of this aspect of humility in particular. And so I can't say that what happens at the Gurdwara necessarily goes out, or maybe it goes out into the world in different ways. But I think that without this, perhaps, the behavior outside may be yet even more different, right? So one can't conduct, it's the nature of our research that we can't conduct control experiments. I can't do a longitudinal study of, how this affects somebody's ethics or their behavior. But I do see that people imbibe. In some of my interviews, people talked about how they make an effort to let go of control, how, they are troubled when there was one example where someone said they had a sales job, and they said when they're doing the sales pitch, they feel uncomfortable because they feel that it does not have the same measure of truthfulness that they have learned from Guru Granth Sahib or partaking in Kirtan. So it does flow. And, of course, Sikhs are not able to perfectly be, perfect ethical human beings because the context is so important. Once we are outside of the Gurdwara, we are subject to all those other pressures and influences of the world. And what we can say is that hopefully this helps. But at the Gurdwara, all these aspects are there. I also actually, speaking of relationality and thinking of relationality as undergirding this principle of ethical action, I was wondering if you wanted to say a couple of words about how relationality has played in your work, how you have discovered it, in the traditions you have studied, because you have studied both the Marathi Kirtan tradition and the Jewish Kirtan, which is marvelous. So I'm thinking, the audience members, especially, I mean, they must be curious, what is Jewish Kirtan or Jewish practice in India? So, and how is relationality there? So I would love to hear, a bit from you. And I could take the share off here.
Yeah, thank you for that response and that question also. Yeah, I have been working on Indian Jewish devotional singing and among the genres that Indian Jewish people and women in particular sing today are Kirtan. And it's an adaptation of Marathi Naradiya Kirtan, which is what in other parts of India might be known as Harikatha. So it's storytelling with various song genres woven into it. And it was adapted from um, Jewish people, Marathi speaking Jewish people, um, encountered Hindu Kirtan in the 19th century and made a conscious choice to adapt it and transform it into a Jewish mode of worship. Um, and so I'm interested and so perform Kirtan on biblical stories, on Joseph, on um, Abraham, on Isaac. Um, and and so I'm interested in various things regarding relationality. One is just the relationality of people who sing together. So there is Kirtan, which is more of a performance, sort of presentational form now. But there are also many songs that are just sung by people singing together. And again, particularly women. And so I'm interested in how song becomes a means for people to share religious knowledge and deepen their connection to one another and to those who have passed on. So, on one sense, there's relationality on this intimate level of people singing together, but then also relationality as um, through the kind of translational practice of taking a mode of performance, borrowing a mode of performance from another religious community and adapting it, transforming it, and how it both shows the creativity of people doing that, engaging in that transformation, but also how it gestures at a hopefulness that there is something about religion that is translatable, that crosses boundaries. And so in this case, between different religious communities in South Asia and also between different Jewish communities that B'nai Israel people have also borrowed from. So yeah, I think I feel a similarity in the sense of like a belief in shared humanity and the basic oneness of, of of people searching and and connecting. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. If oneness has to be a foundational truth, then it is but natural we'll find it in different places. It can't be just present in Sikh wisdom and be a foundational truth. Uh,
right.
so it does seem, and I'm so glad you mentioned singing together. And I think I might share a couple more slides of how sound and kirtan as sound actually amplifies this feeling of oneness. So I'm gonna,
That's great. That's
okay,
great.
cool, cool. Um, so let me see if I can move this slide. Okay, all right. So the role of sound and kirtan as a sonic practice that I have focused on is, or I propose, is that it activates the body to sense its own oneness, that its own vibratory constitution. And Gurbani, or the words, the poetry in Guru Granth Sahib is understood as Turki Bani, that's as coming from the beyond and this sort of enlightenment and the expression of that. And so that itself, that poetry is oral utterance and it is sound. So before we even think of kirtan or musical expression, even if we think of speech itself, speech is sound. And I just wanted to draw attention to these qualities of sound. That as waves, sound pervades our body. And it is not just through the external ear that the sound enters, but in fact, these vibrations and sound waves impact the entire body, and it pervades through the skin into the viscera, into the bones, into the physiological system. We know our heartbeat, our heart rate changes, our respiration changes, and in Gurbani it says that our very cognitive abilities change, our neurological system changes when we partake of Gurbani and Kirtan. And also sound is intersensorial, meaning that it is not just a oral sensation, but actually works with other sensations to elevate all our senses. And we know from practice that in the Gurdwara, when we are looking at the projected words, poetry, but also singing along, that has a magnified effect and affect. So, and then, it's a cliche that sound moves us or music moves us. We know, we say that all the time. But I think in thinking about our body as vibrationally constituted, this is a literal thing that happens, that actually our bodily systems move. It's not, may not be external. In some practices that it translates into dance and movement, and that's not the etiquette in the Gurdwara, or even clapping is not, but the body, even if it's not moving externally, it is moving internally, and it is being changed. And then when we think of kirtan as this sort of musical expression, as an aesthetic expression, which we enjoy, then it amplifies not only the poetic beauty of Gurbani, but the effect that it has on the body. And the Shabad tell us to enjoy kirtan with relish, ras gun gao. So the idea of ras, and to just become engrossed sort of in a physical way, in the way that our hormones are flowing, and connected to that, our emotions is there in Gurbani. And of course, then this brings me to the point that you said of singing together and listening together is where these sound waves, these vibrations, they are transmitted body to body, and so are the feelings and the sort of meanings that are flowing. So this is the cover of the book, and you can see this is the Darbar of Gurdwara Sahib San Jose, and I took this picture on New Year's Eve last year. Or so this picture is probably at 11:55 p.m. December 31st, 2024, and so this is a huge worship hall, and it's full of people, and there's such an energy on that day. And actually, I want to do some writing on this, how this vibration, this Anhad Nad, just flows that day with over 2,000 people there present in the Gurdwara. And but just to give a little bit of about the book, just a few minutes before we can maybe take some questions. What I've tried in the book, and it's called Sensational Rhythms, because I've thought of the vibration, the Anhad Nad, as a micro rhythm, and to say that that is a sensational thing, to have a vibration of oneness in one's body. I think that's a pretty sensational thing. And then it becomes more amplified with kirtan. And therefore, I've used sensational rhythms of the ineffable being ikonkar, and that Gurbani says that we have no words to describe, but we can feel, right? It's beyond cognitive capture, but the body feels it. And then the latter part, the ethical affects, is because of my interest in ethics. And I've talked about how these affects or feelings of awe and aura and of love, etc., flow as ethical sensations, ras in the body. And so I've tried a multi-layered exposition and analysis, trying to give both introductory and in-depth analysis, and to make it accessible for non-academics. And so even though I use all kinds of theory, some paragraphs can be skipped without sort of it interfering with understanding the main points of the book. And there's a lot of Gurbani in the book, a lot which is all sort of translated in interpretive terms that I've done. And so I have explained kirtan and its different musical styles, the main musical styles, the classical, the light, and the AKJ, the Akhand Kirtani Jatha, which is the most participatory and very, very affective. And I have, what I did was, as you mentioned, instead of looking at Euro-American theories of why sound or kirtan is effective, I've looked to the Shabad themselves, and and said, well, what is a theory within the Shabad? Can I find a theory? And I have called this the Sikh theory of lived rhythm, and lived because all of this is within our bodies and our lived life. The micro rhythm of vibration, the macro rhythms of everyday life that the Shabad talk about, that we should feel this ethics and this vibration of oneness, Sovat Jagat, sleeping and awakening, Uthat Bathat, sitting and arising, Hasdya Khelda, laughing and playing, and Din Ran, day and night. And so all these macro rhythms of everyday life are to be infused with this play of oneness, and that musical rhythms of Kirtan, this playing of music with the use of Gurbani, and in that context, actually then amplifies the body's both experience of oneness and the ability, without myself being able to prove it completely, but only partially, the body's ability to enact ethical action. And so my thesis in the book is that the musical rhythms of Kirtan amplify the micro rhythms of oneness for their transference into the macro rhythms of everyday life. So the thesis is what it intends to do, rather than like a test of whether it has done that or not. But as I mentioned a few instances, in my ethnographic work, people say that it affects their daily lives and how they live. And of course, I myself have felt that. And so this is the deep intertwining of Sikh metaphysics, aesthetic expression, which is kirtan, and chanting, etc., the functioning body and lived ethics, which I've tried to explore in the book. So that's just a little bit about the book, and I hope people will read and give me feedback.
Oh, I hope they do too. It is such a treat to read. I think everyone here will get so much out of it as I did. And your comments raised so much for me. And I may jump in again with more questions, but first, maybe we can turn toward the Q&A. And if you're listening, feel free to drop a question in the Q&A or in the webinar chat, and I will read them out for Inderjeet to answer. So the first one, but from Kulvinder Singh, asks, before Sikh traditions and the gurus, did you find santas and sheikhs, including Sufis, who had taught or found the same principles, oneness, seva, etc.?
Thank you for that question. So the ideas of oneness and seva are there in Sufi practice, definitely, and they're also in certain, I think, practices in Hinduism and perhaps more traditions that I have not studied. I have not done a historical study to see which came before, so I will not comment on that. But what I will say is that when it comes to these practices and to musical practices, there is a lot of circulation, which means that people learn from each other. The practices, including musical practices and musical forms, as your research is showing for Jewish devotional singing in Maharashtra. And I mean, I'm sure, I didn't know of that before your work, that even exists. And so, when people exist together, they learn from each other. So to what extent have some Sikh practices derived from Sufi practice? That is difficult for me to say, both because, one, I have not studied it, but also because this circulation, makes it difficult to kind of find an originary answer as to the origin, right? And so I'm also not so interested in sort of seeking where these sort of ideas of origin, but I'm interested in how they percolate, how they are practiced, and how this relationality or this idea of oneness works, within Sikh practice and in many other spaces. And that I feel that sometimes, Sikhs feel a little diminished because people say, oh, that's already there in Hinduism, this thought, or this is already there. And I encourage everybody not to think like that because the ways that things are put together in Gurbani as Gurmat uh, and the ways they are practiced, it's like a unique garden or a unique bouquet of flowers with its own flavors and colors. And so it's there to enjoy amongst the entire garden of existence. And so the sharing and etc., I think is very good. Wherever it comes and however it flows. So it's not quite a direct answer. I hope you'll forgive me, but those are my views on circulation.
Yeah, there's another question that I'll ask you in a moment here, but first I want to throw in another question just from me, which is that you sort of raise issues of method of, how do we learn what we know? How do we know what we know? And for some readers, the ethnographic method you use in your book is maybe something they haven't encountered too much. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the process of your research and and what emerged as most surprising to you as someone who has been a lifelong practicing Sikh, but when you engaged with this community and this practice now as an ethnographer, what was, maybe you could share a couple things. I mean, of course, there are vast insights in the book, but something that some way in which your perspective was shifted by adopting this other method.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So the typical ways of doing, just for first to just share with everyone, of doing ethnographic work is to go and observe cultures, to interview people, talk to them, and they can be formal interviews or informal interviews. What I discovered was that if we are talking about the ineffable, which already means we can't really express it, how are people going to talk about it? And I encountered so many times, I would approach someone who I could see was so deeply affected by the kirtan, and they seemed to be in this kind of special space and time of experience, and they would say, I don't have anything to say. And I realized, yeah, this is not going to work if I keep asking people to express in words what is ineffable. So I then, because I guess I have been part of Sikh. I was raised born and raised in a Sikh family with Kirtan, and I've been singing Kirtan since I don't even remember how old. But I decided that, well, I am sensing things that people are sensing because I'm also sensing it, right? So I have this experience of the ineffable, and it is helping me to connect with people and sense their sensations, right? And so I adopted what is called sensory ethnography and participant sensation. So the old anthropology method is participant observation. You go and observe, but this is no, well, observation is a sensation, but this is a more complete sensation where so I would sit when I'm sitting next to people, I try to sense, like, is their body feeling taut? Is it relaxed? What's their breathing feeling like? And then I would notice how do they walk. Sometimes when I was at homes of, I have a friend that I can give a special shout out to, though she does not like to be mentioned. But she's in San Leandro and hosts these awesome kirtan programs in her home. And it's like not a big house, but her heart is so big. We are really packed in there. So one can literally, one is touching knee to knee. One can feel the body a tautness and or relaxation of the person, and I could see them before and after the Kirtan session, and their comportment has changed. They even looked like larger than themselves, as they've grown in sort of this capacity. And so this idea of unboundedness of ourselves, that we are not limited by the skin, and that we are these relational human beings where we can be open, we can be magnanimous and caring and empathetic, and their speech was different also, their whole comportment was different after the Kirtan session. So these were some things, the methods that I used in my research. And the thing I think that surprised me the most in this process is actually also is both how effective Kirtan is, but also in the interviews that I did and the conversations that I had, how much wisdom resides in everyday people. And I used, of course, I read the Guru Granth Sahib. I listened to many exegeses of community scholars, kathakars on YouTube at Gurdwara. But I also talked to everyday people, young, old, in between. And they're all, there's so much wisdom there that I felt so humbled. And, I also felt like, okay, I want to write a book that they would read and say it's okay, Yeah.
That's wonderful. I mean, it just sounds like, you were able to engage in these contexts in such a heightened way with, really like focusing on on your own experience, but also how you're sharing that experience with others. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Let's turn to this question by Lou French, who says, "Hi, Inderjeet and Sati Shri Akal. Beautifully done. Can't wait to read your book. As a historian of the Panth, I can say that the sonic character of Sikh history books, which were meant to be performed in the 18th and 19th centuries, is always sidelined for the linear or thematic narratives of history, which is surprising given that so many 18th and 19th century books, which recount a Sikh past, convey their narratives in the very melodic frameworks of the Guru Granth Sahib and the Dasam Granth. Would you say then that the act of conveying these histories before, say, the new European ways of recounting the past ushered in the early 20th century, ensconced as they are in the Guru Granth Sahib's rhythms, are also devotional texts? Devotional and ethical texts.
Okay. Hi, Lou. Thank you for attending, and thank you for this question. Um, yes, I have focused on scriptural songs, but I think my next project is on non-scriptural songs. So Tadivar, maybe I think you are maybe referring to those, and also to Dharmik Geet. And other forms. So absolutely. And I think that, you know, of course, I'm not a historian, so I will not make any historical claims. My book and my research is really on the contemporary practice. So I will be very careful here. But I do want to say that this sort of binary between sacred and secular is also something that does not necessarily flow out. Of course, we do treat Guru now, we do treat Guru Granth Sahib, and as far as I know, historically also during the Guru's time, Guru Granth Sahib is treated with great reverence as sacred and to be given the most respect as compared to non-scriptural poetry or texts. But the conversation between non-scriptural and scriptural output, if I might call it that, or poetry, or writings on, etc., is immense. And actually, one of the papers that I want to write is how these Dharmic Geet are themselves like exegesis of the poetry in Guru Granth Sahib. There was one part of the question that I think I've forgotten, something about the rhythms. Was it asking whether the musical expressions of Guru Granth Sahib are affected by the non-scriptural musical expressions?
Um, so the new, would you say then the act of conveying these histories before the new European ways of recounting the past ushered in the early 20th century, ensconced as they are in the Guru Granth Sahib's rhythms, are also devotional texts, um, devotional and ethical texts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say ethical texts. I'm not quite sure what is being referred to. So, Lou, we definitely have to talk later, and I would love to know more about what you meant here. And as I'm shaping my next project, I would love to know. But I, I'm a little bit. I'm not sure I understand how the some European ways are ensconced in the Guru Granth Sahib. Part I don't understand. So I will have to gain some clarification later as well. But thanks, Lou. I appreciate it so much.
Maybe we can, I'll briefly touch on something that Kulvinder Singh also asked about kirtan. They wrote, kirtan is a term used in yoga and played while exercising. Jewish tradition has cantor singing. And I'll just mention that what I was talking about was the vernacular devotional song tradition of Marathi in the Marathi Jewish tradition. Of course, cantors sing in Hebrew in the synagogues, the liturgical songs. So this is a sort of extra liturgical practice that I'm referring to. And Elizabeth Weigler asked, can you elaborate on relationality and perhaps a good work of yours to read up on its use? And to elaborate, this is more a question of other academic work you're inspired by, since relationality as a term is used in different ways. For example, indigenous approaches to research. Thank you.
Mm. Yes, thank you for your question. Um, so I've written a couple of articles. One is called, I won't be able to remember the exact names, but one is refers to something as Kirtan and Langar as practices of non-otherness. And so that relationality I've explored there. There's another one which I think was published in October 20 of this year, and there I've talked about the relationality of aesthetics and ethics, and how different musical styles of Kirtan themselves are a practice of this relational oneness and of diversity. In terms of reading other works, and it's interesting that Sufism was mentioned by Kulvinder Singh, that one of first, of course, the first book I read was Anna's on Marathi Kirtan. But of course, that talks about a different kind of relationality. And, maybe Anna, you want to come back to the kind of relationality that's there in that book. But it gave me a lot of insights into thinking about the power of music in terms of creating these sort of affects. But after that, I've read a lot of work on Sufi music by a scholar, Deborah Kapchan, and she's at New York University, and she researches Sufi practices in Morocco and Moroccans, and especially Moroccan women in France who are settled in France. And so the idea of how singing together in close proximity, and so she talks about this ethics of proximity, and when we are in close proximity, physical, corporeal proximity with each other, sitting, as I've said, in my friend's home, knee to knee, we are there. That has a certain power of transmission of whatever ideology is there. So, the ideology that you explored, Anna, in your book on Marathi Kirtan is a different ideology. And so relationality, I think one thing I think maybe I should mention is that sound itself uh, does not have ideology. The ideology comes from the context, from the lyrics, if there are lyrics, right? Um, and whatever the cultural ideology is. And therefore, for Sikh practice, Guru Granth Sahib and the poetry in Guru Granth Sahib is very important. Or if we look at non-scriptural poetry, as Lou Fenech mentioned, the kinds of ethics and values that are furthered there is what sound will carry. Sound carries whatever the ethics is over there. And I think coming to indigenous practice, two areas of research that I really want to dig more deeply into is indigenous studies and Black studies. And I think that the relationality that is there from the little I've studied in indigenous studies of interpersonal and also with nature, with the land, it's so powerful. So again, the sonic practices there carry that ideology and sound can carry negative ideologies very powerfully. It can be a mechanism of war, of hatred, etc. And so what we are singing, or what is the larger cultural ideology that we are amplifying? Sound amplifies, music amplifies. What it amplifies, that we have to, pay attention to.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I second the call to read Deborah Kapchan's work. That was also her work is a huge inspiration on how I'm thinking about relationality and translation. And the proximity article is wonderful. I think you also have an article in that same collection. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Mine is on Ras and how Ras is an embodied experience, and this use of this kind of a fluid or liquid metaphor of is something that I take actually quite seriously, because if Ras resides in our body, Ras meaning juice, the juices of our body have to become oneness, or we have to perceive that and amplify that. And so that was my article. Thank you. Yeah, I forget these different pieces of myself. Writing the book, it's kind of a bit of a marathon. One gets exhausted at the end.
For sure. Well, it looks like we are just past 1 o'clock. Maybe I don't see any other questions appearing in the chat. So maybe I will ask one final question, picking up on your mention of Ras. And I wondered if you could speak just a bit about, or maybe I should say expand a bit on your discussion of intersensorial affect and intersensorial research methods. You've talked about sort of, sharing experience with someone sitting next to you about sound in combination with sight and hearing the words of Gurbani. But you also talk about taste and other senses. So I wondered if you could speak a little more expansively about how you're thinking about sensation and the sensory.
Yeah, thank you. And as with the other parts of my research, I first draw from Gurbani. So, that is my theoretical source. And if I see in other writings, and in Euro-American theories, things that sort of align with that, then I will use those theories. Otherwise, I will not. Because as you mentioned, I'm very invested in native epistemologies and not just kind of amplifying Western ways of knowing and thinking, but that we have these very powerful theories in song So, one of my chapters, which is on Anhad, is called Theory in Song, because we don't think of Guru Granth Sahib necessarily as theoretical. But I sort of combed it and said, there are theories in here. And I think Ras is such a theory. And coming to intersensoriality, then, in the Shabad, it says ras is for drinking, for tasting. And ras, of course, means savoring also, in addition to, being a juice, which has been thought of also as essence. And all these ways, things are polysemic. So they have multiple meanings and they kind of inform each other. And so first of all, in Guru Granth Sahib, we have this intersensoriality, and even listening itself is presented as intersensorial and very capacious. And so in the opening composition, the Jap, there are verses on Sunye. Sunye tarat dhaval akas, listen to the earth, listen to the subterranean, listen to the sky, the atmosphere. And so, we are being asked to listen not just to audible sound, but to, the airwaves, what is the atmosphere telling us? We are told that Pavan is Guru, Pavan Guru, Pani Pita, Mata Tarat Mahata, Mother is the earth, water is our father, the air atmosphere is our guru. So listening to the guru is also listening to nature. And so it's very environmentally rich and in that guidance. And so intersensoriality and this capacious way of listening intersensorially is coming from Guru Granth Sahib first. Then we come to practice. We enter the Gurdwara, and you have experienced this, Anna. Of course, we've been to the Gurdwara together also.
Together, yeah.
In San Jose Gurdwara. And, one smells the wonderful sweet prasad, the buttery, taste and smell there. And they're beautiful scarves. The Guru Granth Sahib is staged so beautifully. There are these marvelous sights, and of course, the projection on the overhead. And so, we have this, and of course, the langar is so tasty. For me, the tastiest food in the world is savory, after the sweet prasad inside the Darbar Sahib. And so, yeah, we are literally tasting and ingesting the guidance. So Guru Granth Sahib saying that, you have to eat and drink and digest it. And we are there eating and digesting sacred food. And so, physically our body is doing that process as we are talking. And so I think of these as not as metaphors, as sort of abstract, sort of conceptual or literary tropes. I'm thinking that these come from bodily feelings, right? And then when all of these bodies, different senses, and not to talk about balance, the balance of sitting, of comportment, right? That's also a sensation. Memory, that goes into being there again and again, of listening to these songs, historical narratives, the Guru Granth Sahib. All these senses, when they are playing together, they interplay. And when they interplay, the body is more alive and it's more receptive and it is more feelingful. And when it is more feelingful, it is cognitively richer. And that's one point that I also like to make, is that, and it's from Gurbani again, that if we are dry, Sukh gaye kumlai. If we are dry, we are going to wither. And dryness is this being bereft of this rich ras of oneness. So that's how, briefly, how it comes through.
That is beautiful. And I can't think of a more fitting way to end this conversation. Thank you for such an enriching conversation and for sharing this work. And I encourage everyone to dig more deeply into Inderjeet Kaur's work, to study her book. And thank you again to the Sikh Foundation and to Tanmeet Gujral for inviting us to be here with you today. Have a lovely afternoon.